There was pig sticking, hunting, black buck from a Rolls Royce with the Maharaja, and shooting tigers and panthers, which, listen to this, you guys. They would go out to shoot tigers and panthers, but these animals had been taken from a zoo and they'd been doped. What? What kind of a sport is that? Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. Today we are doing chapter 4 of the Mountbattens. This chapter is called Duty, and in the last chapter we had gotten to the fact that Dickie has met Edwina and that their paths have crossed and that they are completely obsessed with each other. But even though he wanted to propose in the last chapter, he felt like it wasn't the right time. Both of them had just had significant losses in their life. He had just lost his father. She had just lost her grandfather, remarkably within a span of a couple of weeks of each other. So both of them are reeling from personal loss, which probably helped to throw the two of them together even more significantly because, they're clinging to each other in their grief. And it really sort of emphasizes the love and connection that they have for each other that maybe they wouldn't have felt had they not been in such difficult places that both of their hearts could recognize in each other. So it's not just like I really love you and you really love me, but now you have a significant loss that is reflected in my significant loss, and like they're sort of communing together through that. So we have massive love at the end of the last chapter, but they've decided to hold off for just a minute. But this chapter is when they finally just decide to throw caution to the wind and forget their youth and just go ahead and jump right in where they want to be. This is also a chapter that is very short, but we get a huge picture of who Edwina is and who she's going to continue to be throughout this book. Up to this point, I didn't really have an opinion about Edwina one way or the other, honestly. Like, I kind of looked at Edwina as an interesting individual, but, I didn't really like her one way. I didn't dislike her in another way. She just was a character in the book. We haven't had that much about her, so we couldn't really form an opinion. And of course, you all can form your own opinion, but let me tell you right now, I'm not liking Edwina as much as I thought I might. Now, I've been primed to dislike Dickie because everyone is like, well, you just wait till the scandals later. And the truth is, to this point, I don't dislike him at all. And it really saddens me to imagine that he's going to become a character that I have not only disdain for, but potential disgust. I can assure you I'll have disgust if what people are telling me will happen actually happens in this book. And they've read it and I haven't, so I'm, All this to say, it's really too bad right now to me because I like him. Really, I actually don't know that much about Dickie, even though we've read quite a bit about his life. I mean, I haven't seen him interact that often with people one way or the other. The main interaction we've seen him have is with, David. David is such an appalling character. All your attention goes to David. You're not really, at least I'm not really honing in on the way that Dickie is behaving in that relationship. But up until now, he's just been a very pleasant person. And in this chapter, he continues to be a very pleasant person who I really like. And next to what would appear to be his very genuine and earnest sort of young man behavior in this new episode of Love with Edwina, Edwina comes off very cold and just, I don't like her. And in the next chapter, I really don't like her. I'm going to try to do 2 chapters today. The first chapter we're doing today is Duty. The second chapter that we will potentially get into is called Honeymoon. And she comes off, this chapter primes you to be like, oh, I don't know about this girl. And then the next chapter, you're like, oh my gosh, Dickie, really? Is this who you settled for? Of course, he's trying to mend his heart. He's on the rebound from Audrey. And so I think Dickie just loved love. I think he loved falling in love. I think he was all about those heady feelings and the obsessive feelings you feel when you're falling in love and you're just like, you can't get enough of this person. And we see that, from the letters that he wrote home and from the constant conversations he was having with other guys. He loves women. He loves love. And so to have had his heart broken by Audrey was just like this emotionally turbulent thing. But then to quickly find Edwina and, he writes to his mother that he loves her even more than he loved Audrey. Well, how is that even possible? He was willing to, scale the skies and climb the stars to grab the moon for Audrey, so you can imagine now how much he loves Edwina if he says he loves her even more than Audrey. So I don't know. We've got a lot to talk about, even though it's a short chapter. But you guys let me know what you think of Edwina by the end of this chapter, because she's not my favorite person anymore. Not that she ever really was, but I guess I think the thing is that I hadn't developed any sort of opinion of her. And so this chapter, I actually had something to sort of cling to about how I felt about her. All right, chapter 4, like I said, it's called Duty. And this is, he really has ingratiated himself into the inner circle of the Prince of Wales. He went on that last tour. He became the prince's best friend on the ship, much to everybody else's chagrin and jealousy. And so now that the Prince of Wales is going on another tour, this time to India, it's like a given Dickie's going. So on October 26, 1921, the Renown set sail. The Duke of York and Prince Henry saw their brother off, while Dickie's brother, mother, and sister Louise came on board to say their farewells. Tactfully, Edwina was left for half an hour with Dickie in his cabin. He gave her a little watch to mark time Weisel parted. As the ship pulled away, Dickie trained his telescope on the shore, and that night he wrote, "My own beloved darling, when you get this, we will have been parted for the last time for a long while, and so I want to tell you that you will be truly ever in my thoughts, and will be my guiding spirit throughout. I shall try very hard to be worthy of your great love, though, darling, it is difficult for a poor sinner like me to look upon such a wonderful, wonderful girl." First of all, 2 things here. 1, a rather communicative young man. Really doesn't feel shy about putting his feelings down on the paper. Good for him. But the other thing is, he just loves love. He loves falling in love. And it's just so clear in the way he writes to her, the way he writes to his mother about his girlfriends. He just loves the heady feeling of being in love, like I already said. And we'll see it from all the rest of his communication. There's no embarrassment for him. There's no shortness of words with him when he wants to express his effusive love and his very tender feelings towards the girl he's dating. But in contrast, Edwina's not quite as effusive in her expressions. While Dickie wrote every day, bought her a birthday present, and continued to tell her how much he missed her, Edwina was determined that separation would not change her life. I mean, I might be dating that guy, but he's gone, and I've got to carry on. Now, on the one hand, you want to say that's healthy lifestyle, because you can't just sit there pining away, crying tears into your pillow and ripping your hair out, waiting for the man to come back. I mean, if you're going to be with somebody whose job is in the Navy, you need to learn how to carry on life, because he's going to be gone a lot, right? So I'm not shaming her for wanting to go on. I'm not shaming her at all over anything. I'm just saying it would seem that his love letters and his obsession with her isn't exactly mirrored in the way she feels about him. And I wouldn't say that she's running home to tell him all about how much she loves him. In fact, the book goes on to say that she continued to go to the theater and out dancing, and thought nothing of mentioning her admirers, such as the Harvard-educated banker and international sailor Paul Hammond, who had been with them at Cowes. I mean, I don't know what her point in all of that is. Is she trying to make Dickie jealous? Is she trying to retain her freedom? Is she trying to let him know, look, while you're gone, my life's not ending. I'm going to keep it on. Or is she trying to let him know, okay, if we actually become a thing, you just need to know that I'm not really a one-man woman. Like, what is her point in telling him all of this? It couldn't just be because she's letting him know about her day, because it's this is a letter. This is a piece of paper that you get to decide from today what you're going to convey to your lover out at sea. Everything you write down means something. It's not just I don't know. We were just talking and I just mentioned it. It's completely different than a phone call, or it's completely different than a conversation you'd have at the end of the day. Because this person's going to read and reread this letter till he gets another one. So you want him to know something from what you're saying. I will tell you, though, her desire to just go out and we're going to see that reflected again once she becomes a mother. Okay? She's not going to let anything tie her down. Not husband, not kids, not lover. The book expounds on Edwina's love of going out and living her best life. It goes on to say, I had great fun at Edwina's. Her cousin, Marjorie Brecknock, was there also. Most amusing. I found out, which will please Harold, that Edwina is a real flirt, and anything but as innocent as Dickie thought her to be, wrote Michael Boy Torby, brother of Nada Milford Haven, to their sister Zia Vernher. They were awfully funny, and they both had a go at me to find out what sort of a chap I was and were delighted when they found out I had a dirty mind like their own. Dickie, by the way, was left hurt and jealous by the way she behaved at this particular event, and it did not augur well for a future marriage, I will tell you. Edwina, in spite of her flirtations, was bored and lonely. Suggestions that she see Grace Vanderbilt in America or accompanying Wilfred and Molly to Italy came to nothing. What about India and seeing Dickie? She could always stay with family friends, the Viceroy, Lord Reading, and his wife. All she needed was the fare and a chaperone to accompany her. Her great-aunt, Mrs. Castle, obliged with the first, and a search through the passenger shipping lists provides a suitable casual acquaintance, Mrs. Carey Evans, a daughter of Lloyd George, and the wife of the Viceroy's personal physician, who was taking her two small children to India. The two women played poker with some of the officers each evening, and Carey Evans, quote, used to get cross with Edwina because she always wanted to win. She was a spoilt little rich girl, and luck was usually with her. She thought Edwina mixed with people who were, quote, undesirable, but only exercised her role as chaperone once when Edwina wished to go out late in Aden. As a person, Edwina was fearless. Nothing seemed to frighten her, and I suppose the idea of going ashore late at night, when there could be dangers lurking around every corner, simply exhilarated her. But I'm afraid I never really liked her, and she always seemed to me to be a woman completely without warmth. It's interesting that one of people's greatest insults against another person is to say that they are without warmth. When we read Trader King, that's what people consistently point to Wallace Simpson as lacking. She didn't have warmth. She didn't have warmth. If they could say nothing else about her, it was that she was cold. They hated that about her. And isn't that a life lesson? It's like, we can go through life and do all the right things. But if we do it without love and without warmth and without genuine care, people can see it. People don't care what airs you put on or what you can give them or your social standing. How do you make them feel? And that is what people will remember. And apparently, this Edwina was rather cold if she wanted to be. Okay, well, what is Dickie doing on his Indian tour? One purpose of the royal tour had been to improve Anglo-Indian relations, especially after the 1919 Amritsar massacre. But the reception was not always favorable. The Indian National Congress had organized a boycott of the tour. There were demonstrations, and at one point there were fires shot at the ADC's car. In Allahabad, the young Jawaharlal Nehru and his father were locked up as the royal party passed through. And the prince pined for Frida Dudley Ward, and punished himself with violent exercise and a near-starvation diet. Yeah, we did read a little bit about that. Something is really wrong with the way he views food and the way he views his own body. He hates himself. He hates himself, and you see it through the way he wouldn't hardly eat anything and the way he was always exercising to the point of exhaustion. And he didn't look like a healthy person. I mean, we've seen him without his clothes on. I mean, it isn't like he was, really building up a body and really, bodybuilders can be as sick in the head as an anorexic. So I'm not saying that if you physically look good, that means you're mentally healthy, because that's not always true either. What I'm saying is, to have gone through all the effort and to have still looked like such a hot mess, it seems a real shame. Anyway, he definitely punished himself consistently through food deprivation and exercising to exhaustion. And to me, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychiatrist, but it would really reflect a sense of self-disdain to do that to yourself constantly and continually. Alongside the official functions, however, there was plenty of time for other pursuits. Apart from discovering polo, a sport that was to remain a passion all his life, there was pig-sticking, hunting, black buck from a Rolls-Royce with the Maharaja, and shooting tigers and panthers, which, listen to this, you guys, they would go out to shoot tigers and panthers, but these animals had been taken from a zoo and they'd been doped. What? What kind of sport is that? How tragic. How tragic. I'm not against hunting. Trophy hunting's problematic because I've never heard about anybody eating a tiger. But talk about completely void of morals and ethics to take tigers and panthers who've been raised in a zoo, so wouldn't have the natural instincts for self-preservation, and then you dope them so that you have a chance of shooting them? Where's the sport in that? At each port, Dickie's letters awaited Edwina, and he was always sending her pictures and little things to sort of entertain her in the letters. He'd draw pictures of the royal party that she was about to meet. One person that he was particular in pointing out to her was a fellow named Fruity Metcalf. You guys, I'm sorry to keep bringing things back to Trader King, but all of these people are coming back from that book. If you didn't watch that series, I implore you to watch it because it will illuminate you to so many of these relationships. But you recall that Fruity Metcalf was big friends with Prince of Wales, David. And David relied on Fruity so much during the whole situation with he and Wallace Simpson. When he and Wallace Simpson couldn't get married, Fruity Metcalf came and hung around him. But then by the end of that book of Trader King, we found out that Fruity Metcalf and David had a sexual relationship. So that was weird and wild. Here comes Fruity Metcalf. He's making his debut in this book. And according to Dickie, Metcalf was, quote, the nicest fellow we have. Poor, honest, a typical Indian cavalryman. And Dickie also really loved to let Edwina know about his precedence and his importance in this royal touring group. And he would tell, apparently they were all ranked. And he says, as a naval lieutenant, mine is 78, as an ADC to the POW 74. And if I were out here as a member of the family, you could take off 70. Knowing his real ranking, he could, quote, laugh secretly at all these poor, misguided people struggling to go even one place higher. It was clear that Dickie cared very much about these things, that he would want to convey to her. Officially, I'm listed at 78, 74. But if you really knew the fact, I'm a member of the royal family. So actually, I'm really 4 or 8. And it's so funny that everyone's over here, trying to scale the ladder, but I secretly am actually number 8. Yeah. Kind of cool, right? And is it any wonder that he would brag to Edwina about this? Because think about how the money that she had, and think about how he is in relative poverty compared to the kind of money that she was making. He can't offer her anything in marriage that she doesn't already have. There's not one physical, material thing that he could give her. She can buy anything she wants at any time, whenever. Only thing he can offer her is his rank in society, which is quite good, and something that her money could not buy. And so, is it any wonder that this man would brag to her about what he can bring to her life? He's not saying, well, if you marry me, you're going to be ranked like this, but that's the message she should get. The message she should get is, look what I can give you. Look who I am in life, And I think, not to be archaic about it, but I think this would be a time where a man might feel a little less than that he's marrying a woman who can give him more than he can give her, physically, materially, monetarily. But he can give her status. And so, of course, he's going to bring that up to her. Now, of course, Edwina, she's been traveling to find them. She arrived in Bombay in early February, and that night caught the fast mail train for the 24-hour, 700-mile trip to Delhi. She was staying in the Viceroy's house with another guest, Mrs. Ronnie Grayville. That night, Dickie scribbled in his diary, we played Happy Families after dinner, and then Edwina instructed me in all the new steps that have crept into London dancing since we left in Mrs. Grayville's sitting room. And then writing to his mother a few days later, he confessed, I have been here since Saturday and seen Edwina all day long for 3 whole days. Quite enough for me to realize that she is the most wonderful person in the world, and that life without her would seem a very bleak prospect indeed. This isn't just purely physical attraction, it's her whole nature and character I love. In fact, everything, and though you mayn't believe it, it's quite different from what I ever felt for Audrey. Would you mind if I tried my luck while she's out here, Mama? It's a devil of a long time to wait till we get home, and I've already waited 4 months to ask her. If I wait much longer, the opportunity might pass. So he's feeling desperate, he's got to lock this girl down. He's got to get that proposal out there. She could choose anybody. And he's waited and waited. He's been waiting he wanted to ask her way back then, before he even started on this India tour. Let's just make sure that she and I are actually going to be together. So that night, suitably on Valentine's Day, and 4 months after they had first met at the dance at Claridge's. Only 4 months, you guys. And let me remind you, he's 21 years old. Dickie proposed in the Prince of Wales sitting room, which he had put at their disposal. Edwina immediately accepted. Only the Prince of Wales, who had accepted the invitation to be best man, was told. Miss Edwina Ashley is engaged to Lord Louis Mountbatten. What a waste, Anthony Eden noted in his diary. So apparently, he may have only told the Prince of Wales, but the news got around. It's real sour grapes, because for whatever reason, people really hated Dickie Mountbatten. They just didn't like him. And I don't know why they didn't like him. because nothing that we've been told thus far would really lend itself to us understanding the real, true hatred people had, except for jealousy. They are jealous of the relationship that he has with Prince of Wales. They are jealous of the fact that he seems to be able to ingratiate himself in whatever circle he wants to. But, well, take a leaf out of his book then. I mean, like he said, he dances with the old ladies and he gets invitations to their fancy balls. He pays attention to people who other people aren't paying attention to, and by that interaction becomes involved in their circle. Don't sit there and gripe and, complain and cry into your handkerchief in the corner that you aren't getting all the invites. Go do what he does. Watch what he does and do what he does. Anyway, they didn't like him. And the fact that he would have managed to capture the most beautiful debutante of the season, just like that, after 4 months of knowing her, really grated on some people. The next day, Dickie confided in his diary that he was happy beyond his wildest dreams, and how after a state banquet they had motored out to King Humayun's enormous tomb, which we saw at 3 a.m. by moonlight. Very wonderful and romantic. Enthusiastic letters were written pledging his undying love and praising those bits of her body he'd been allowed to see. A special pleasure was the discreet glimpse of her breasts, which he'd named after the 2 First World War campaign medals, Mutt and Jeff. How unfortunate. Now that Edwin had accepted, permissions had to be requested and arrangements made. I find it interesting that in this day and age he wouldn't have gotten the permission from her father before ever having asked her. It seems like he's really playing, fast, loose, and wild with social mores, that he would have asked her on this trip to India without ever having asked her father first. But interestingly, he didn't need to ask her dad, but he is going to later need to ask King George V if he could marry her, according to that royal social protocol. But anyway, at this point, they've got to make arrangements. 6 days after proposing, the couple told their ostensible matchmaker, Mrs. Ronnie Greville, the viceroy, and his wife. Mrs. Greville, in particular, had her reservations. She wrote to the viceroy and said, "My dear viceroy, I am absolutely wretched about that child. I couldn't sleep a wink, and I have grave misgivings. They were both at me last night, and she will not be reasonable. All I begged for was that no engagement should take place now. In a year, she'll be sick of him. This is absolutely confidential, only I feel that she's being thrown to the wolves. I don't dislike him, but he's wily. She looked so white-faced and motherless last night. Dear viceroy, please insist on no engagement." I don't know how the viceroy was supposed to, outlaw this relationship. That seems questionable to me, that she would even think that he had that kind of a power, but I don't know, maybe he did. Somebody finally reaches out to her dad, Lady Reading, the wife of the viceroy, writing to Wilfred Ashley, put it more simply. I hoped she would care for someone older with more of a career before him. Well, that didn't age very well because he's going to go on to have one of the most illustrious careers of any man in England, but maybe they just didn't think he was ambitious enough. Like maybe they thought he was just too young and that there really wasn't any path forward for him. But they were wrong about him. I mean, that's the thing is he's going to go on to scale ladders and make a name for himself like none of these people could have ever imagined that he could do. But it's like none of them have any. I think the thing that bothers me about all of these criticisms is, yes, they're very young. So I completely understand why Mrs. Greville was like, she's going to be sick of him in a year because they only knew each other for 4 months. So right now they're still in that, obsessive phase where you're so in love you can't even eat, you can't even sleep. Lovely, but no one can exist in that place for that long. But right now that's how they both feel. At least he feels that way, and I'm sure she loved being the object of somebody's obsession. But she would be sick of him in a year. Or potentially. I mean, how does she know? She hasn't been with him long enough to figure out how she really feels, but she's accepted his proposal. So I understand why Mrs. Greville would say, we need to make sure that they don't get engaged because they don't know each other well enough to actually have made that commitment. But nobody can say why they don't like him. I mean, Mrs. Greville says, I don't dislike him, but I think he's wily. What are you talking about? I'm not saying he isn't, but I want to know, how is he wily? And then, Miss Lady Reading saying, I'd hope that she would choose somebody with more of a career ahead of him. How do we know? He's 21 years old. How do we know what his career will be? It's not like he's failed life or anything so far. Now, look, let it just be said. I'm not defending this person. I know next to nothing about this guy, but so far as what we've read, I don't dislike him. Not yet, anyway. I think he is to the point that we've read about him. He seems a very sincere and genuine guy, if a little naive about love. Anyway, none of it takes. They can't persuade her. On February 21st, their last day together, the young couple rode at dawn to the site of the 1911 Dubar, then spent the afternoon together at the pavilion. I took Edwina in to dinner tonight and danced with her and sat out with her till it was time to go, about 10:50, Dickie wrote in his diary. She came to the station and saw us off. I hated leaving. I hated it very much. That day he wrote as a courtesy to George V, asking his formal permission under the Royal Marriages Act to marry, and told his mother, "I've done it," and she said yes. Are you angry? I really do know what I'm about this time, and it isn't just a physical infatuation. Indeed, the supremely physical attraction has only grown since I got to love all the rest of her. Mama, I am just quietly convinced that there is no other girl living who is half so wonderful, sweet, or sympathetic. I feel absolutely, totally unworthy of her. Indeed, I know I am, and I shall spend the rest of my life striving to be even a little worthy of her. It's interesting that in this letter, this is the second time he's written to her to tell his mother, it's not just a physical attraction. It's not. And of course, with Audrey, it seems like he was so obsessed with her physically that he wasn't able to hear what all of his friends around him was saying, which was, this girl doesn't ever commit. You know, you might as well just find somebody else to spend your time with, because it's not this girl. She's not really interested in you. She's interested in your attention, but she's not interested in you. And you're so obsessed with her physically that you can't see it. And his mother must have said the same, because he continues to try to insist upon the fact that he actually likes all of Edwina, not just her pretty little face. He also adds that he really feels ready to be married, and he wrote to his mother saying, I have never really sown any wild oats, and as I never intended to, I haven't got to get over that stage, which some never have to. He is so, in so many ways, such a sweetheart in this chapter. Like, my heart goes out to him because he's so obsessed with this girl. And even as he's away, he's already thinking about married life. He's thinking about the children he's going to have. The book goes on to say that he is going to be the proud bearer of the new family name, Mountbatten, because, you know, his brother's children are now going to go by the last name of Milford Haven, but his line is now going to be Mountbatten. And his thoughts were already turning to becoming a parent. And while he was in Malaya, he was buying children's toys for the future children he was going to have. I mean, that is so sweet and so earnest. You know, here he is all excited about getting married. He's a 21-year-old guy. He's like picking out kids' toys for the kids he will someday have. And your heart just kind of goes out to him because, you know, of course we know things aren't going to go as well as all that. But he doesn't know that yet. The book goes on to say that for all his bravado about, quote, getting off with women, Dickie remained an inexperienced lover. His only previous experience had been a visit to a brothel in Paris in January 1919. Which, you know, who knows even what went down there? You know, did he go because everyone was going? And even if he did find himself with a woman, I mean, how satisfying would that have been? And it doesn't seem like that was something he repeated with any frequency. You know, he would have been 19 years old at the time when that happened. And so, I don't know. I mean, I know he's going to turn out to be a bit of a cad later on. But at this point in his life, my heart truly goes out to him. Probably because, you know, we've seen how Edwina does him. You know, when he's not around, she's still flirting with everybody, telling dirty jokes, not being exactly the sweet and wonderful person that he describes to his mother. But continuing on their journey east, they end up finding themselves in Japan. And when he's not buying children's toys and obsessing about his future wife, and while he's in Japan, he had some real work to do. Traditionally, Japan had been an ally of the British, but the long-standing treaty of friendship had not been renewed, and nationalism was on the rise, and Japan had engaged in rapid rearmament. Attempts by the British Navy attaché to visit their newest battleship, the Mutsu, had been rebuffed, so Dickie, regarded as simply a royal visitor, was recruited to do a little bit of espionage, producing a detailed report for the Admiralty. When they had their homecoming, the huge crowds that awaited them included the king and the queen and most of the cabinet. Edwina was not there in that group, preferring to wait and to see him and be reunited that evening at Marjorie Brecknock's house, where she was staying. During the 8-month trip, Dickie had traveled over 40,000 miles, and the trip had cemented his close friendship with the heir to the throne, enhanced his naval career, and consolidated 3 great loves: India, polo, and Edwina. Dickie, who loved organizing things, threw himself into the preparations for his forthcoming wedding in deadly earnest. Wedding venue, presents, and guests all had to be planned, and furniture for their new home together bought, all neatly labeled with its country of origin. It was nothing compared to Edwina's preparations, especially in terms of her wardrobe. To Queen Mary's shock, even her lingerie was described in the press, each marked with a tiny cipher E and M entwined in a diamond-shaped frame. There was also the business of catching up with friends and being entertained. This was how Edwina liked it, but there was little opportunity for them to spend time together alone. It was a pattern to repeat itself throughout their life. It is interesting that their life together is always in the public eye after this. It's never, they seem to do so much of their life always in the midst of everybody else. And you just wonder how much they ever really needed to get to know each other, because they actually aren't with each other, just each other, all that much. It seemed like there was always a party following them everywhere. And the next chapter is called Honeymoon. We're going to be with them right after their marriage. Dickie has duties that take him away from Edwina fairly soon after their marriage, but we're also going to see what they are like as parents. Edwina becomes pregnant and they have their first baby. It's not great for impression of Edwina, I will say. We don't have time for me to get into that next chapter. I've let 4 pages become almost 40 minutes, so I really need to do a better job at this. But the next chapter, like I said, it's called Honeymoon. We're going to do that hopefully tomorrow. And it's disconcerting. It's disconcerting. If you found yourself not loving Edwina in this chapter, you certainly will not be brought around to her side of things in the next chapter. But I'll see you again very soon later this week, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.